Cool, cool, cool. I think I'm live. Let's see. Yep, we're live.
We're live.
All right, I'm gonna mute this. Looks like. Yep. Yeah, I already got 2 people watching it. Okay, cool. I just have to mute this. And looks like we've got 1 more person on there. Cool. Just gonna wait for a few more people to show up, and then I am gonna grab my coffee, so I'll be right back. Hold on. It's very important. I got my Maple Shop coffee mug.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Fun.
Tough. He only brought 2. 1 got to Joe and 1 got to me. All right, everybody. So thank you guys so much for coming on to our live maple tapping information seminar. As if you were keeping abreast of the discussion posts on the live stream, we had to postpone our actual live maple tapping seminar because of heavy rainfall in southern New Jersey. We got slammed by a tropical storm and it wasn't safe to go out, which is okay, because honestly, it's not perfectly ideal to tap trees in the middle of July, as many people commented. That's kind of pointless since nothing is going to flow in the middle of July. But we will definitely do a live maple tapping demonstration closer into the fall and then into the winter. We'll guide everybody through it. But so in lieu of a live tapping demonstration in the forest and showing you guys some of the active research that we would love to have done in the forest with you guys today, we're just going to give you guys a little bit of an information seminar about what it is that we're doing in southern New Jersey about tapping maple syrup. As always with these live streams, please ask some questions. Just tell us what you're up to. If nothing else, just tell us who you are and why you're interested in this presentation. We would absolutely love to know that you're currently tapping maple trees. And also, I always say this, we are scientists, and that means that we are stupid enough to think that people should be interested in hearing what we want to say, but we're smart enough to know that we don't know everything. And so if you know something that we don't, if you can offer us some advice, if you have suggestions, we would love to hear them. Absolutely. Please chat them and just tell us what you think. Okay? So with that, let me get started. My name is Aaron Stoller. I am one of the principal investigators on the grant. I actually have with me on this session 2 other principal investigators on the grant, Jessica Favorito, who is a soil scientist, and you'll hear from her, and then Judith Vogel, who is a mathematician and economist, and also a backyard maple home maple syrup producer, and you'll hear from her as well. So let's get started. There we go. So the goal of our activity at Stockton, and I'll just say this now, we got a grant from the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. The goal of our activities and the goal of that grant, first and foremost, is to promote the knowledge and activity of maple syrup production in novel markets, not just in southern New Jersey, but anywhere where people aren't conventionally tapping maple trees. I got some comments when I posted this as a live stream, like, well, we know that we can tap in southern New Jersey. That's fantastic. I'm so glad that you can tap. I'm so glad that you knew that. Tell your friends. That's what we want. We want to promote knowledge and activity of maple syrup production. This is such an easy and fun thing to do if you've never done it before. It's just a lot of people don't know that they can do it. And that's what we want. We really want you just to learn that you can do it. So a little bit of background. New Jersey is kind of on that border where it doesn't see a whole lot of maple syrup production, right? This is a little bit outdated. This is like 5 or 6 year old data, but it still holds true today. New Jersey, we don't get a lot of industry in maple syrup. When people think of maple syrup, they think of the northern states, Maine, New York, definitely Vermont, and of course you have Canada that produces a ton of maple syrup. They're not thinking about Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and a lot of the southern states. The reason for that is there's a few reasons for that. All right. Well, the first reason is that we don't have a lot of sugar maple trees. If you know anything about maple syrup production, you know that you need trees to produce that maple sap. And by the way, Jessica, if you're watching the live stream, could you just chime in? Because I can't see questions.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just chime in on the Zoom chat just to tell me if there's questions, because I'm staring at my PowerPoint. So one is that we really don't have sugar maple trees. And sugar maple trees are the most commonly used tree for maple syrup production because they have such a high amount of sugar in the sap. That's just what everybody has been conventionally using. The other problem, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'll talk about it second, is that we have a fairly strange climate in New Jersey. As anyone who lives in New Jersey will tell you, predicting the weather forecast in New Jersey is worthless. It can be raining one second and dry the next, and nobody knows the wiser. And part of it is because we have both Appalachian climate influence as well as coastal climate influence, and that changes how the sap flows in trees. So before we talk about the problem of sugar maples in New Jersey, I have a lot of people that when we're talking about maple syrup production, I have a lot of people that ask me, well, how do I know if I have maples on my property? Let's get that out of the way first. There's 4 primary maple species that we have in New Jersey. And there's really along in the Northeast and really along the entire East Coast, there's 4 species. The 2 most predominant species are sugar maple and red maple, okay? You can identify a sugar maple pretty easily. First of all, there's 5 lobes. By lobes, I mean those jagged things that are sticking out. So it's like a star with 5 points, all right? And I know that there's like smaller points inside the points, so use your imagination, I guess. But there's 5 lobes, and you can see them here. In addition to that, the middle lobe is broad, and that's going to be important when differentiating between sugar maple and your silver maple. So hold on to that. You have a broad middle lobe, and then also really importantly, the edges of sugar maple are smooth, okay? That's going to be different for red maple, which I'll show you in just a second. Sugar maple, 5 lobes, a broad middle lobe, smooth edges. If you don't have leaves on the tree, you can always look on the ground for leaf litter. If there's not a bunch of snow on the ground, you can look for it. The maple leaves will stay intact. Some of them will be present. You can also, of course, look for the seeds, although I'm not doing any seed identification right now. But you can look for the maple leaves on the ground. Color is not a good indicator of which species are which. I know one's called red maple, and so it should be red, but sugar maple leaves are also reddish in color, so not a good quality indicator. Sugar maple bark is also different. It's deeply furrowed. It's light gray, but it has these deep ridges. All right, and so when you're looking at sugar maple trees, it should not be smooth. It should have a deep ridge structure. That's going to be different from red maple. Red maple also kind of has 5 lobes, at least on older or larger leaves. You have these 1, 2, 3 major lobes. And then if the leaf is larger and older, it will likely have 2 more smaller lobes on the base, but they're not always present. Especially on younger leaves, you're not going to get those 2 smaller lobes. And then also really importantly, the edges of the red maple leaf are jagged. The technical term is serrated, like a serrated knife, but they're jagged. Unlike the sugar maple, which has those smooth edges, the red maple edges are jagged. Also, red maple bark is light gray, lighter than sugar maple. On younger red maple trees, it's usually fairly smooth. And on older trees, it's slightly furrowed, but you're never going to get those deep grooves that you get on sugar maples. Okay, and a lot of times you're also going to see lichen growing on the red maples because it is relatively smooth. And so that's a good indicator, although it's not always going to be present because it really depends on how wet the area is. Norway maple, I get a lot of people asking me to identify Norway maple. Norway maple leaves look very similar to sugar maple, all right? Except they're usually much larger than sugar maple, up to twice the size of the sugar maple leaves. They have those smooth edges, they have those 5 lobes, but they're larger. And most characteristically, they will bleed white when they're plucked. And this is a latex compound that the tree produces as an herbivore defense. So when a little bug comes along and munches on the leaf, it gets a taste of this latex compound and it says gross and spits it out and no longer eats it, okay? Norway maple is not usually going to be found in natural forests. It does not propagate well in the United States, or at least in the Northeast. It's often planted, and when planted and cared for, it does grow large, okay? And again, it does look similar to red maple, to sugar maple. And then lastly, we get a lot of people asking, well, maybe I have silver maple leaves. Silver maple leaves are unique in that the underside of the leaves is almost it's very white, very silvery, hence silver maple. The underside of sugar maple and red maple leaves and Norway maple can also be slightly white, but silver maple is very characteristically white. Another thing to note, it has extremely narrow lobes. Remember I said, look at the broadness of that middle lobe. Silver maple leaves tend to be much slimmer in their lobes. They tend to have 5 pronounced points, and they're also slightly jagged around the edges. Okay? Can you tap that? All right, that's the question that a lot of people ask me with a straight face, and I'm a child, and so I wind up cracking up laughing. But yes, you can tap all 4 of those trees. Sugar maple is the most optimal tree to tap. You can absolutely tap sugar maple. It's going to have the most amount of sugar. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck. Absolutely. If you have a sugar maple tree that's large enough, you should tap that. What is large enough? I'll get to that in a second. Red maple, yes, absolutely. If you have a large enough tree, you can tap that tree. The sap is going to have less sugar. Sugar maple is called sugar maple because its sap is so sugary. Red maple has sap. You can tap the red maple tree. It has less sugar, but it's still going to produce really tasty syrup. And tapping red maple trees is really the whole point of our grant at Stockton University, which I'll get to. Silver maple trees, you can absolutely tap those as well. The problem with silver maple trees is that the trees don't usually get large enough to tap. There tend to be a much smaller growing species, and you don't want to tap trees that are really small because you're taking nutrients from the tree when you tap them. And that can be a problem because that'll ultimately hurt the tree. And so if you have a really large silver maple, by all means, you can tap it and you will get good quality syrup. And there are syrup producers that make a living tapping silver maple trees. Norway maple, although the trees get enormous, they're not the greatest species to tap, primarily because they have that latex compound and the sap can taste kind of off and it won't be as tasty. You can tap it. In fact, Jessica is on our live stream monitoring the questions. She has Norway maples on her property and she does tap them. She said that it tastes sweet. Yes, it has sugar in it, so it's going to taste sweet, but it's going to have an off taste to it. Am I right, Jessica?
You are correct.
Yeah. There are ways, if you look at some books on it, there are ways that you might be able to avoid that offness by skimming off the top of the sap output, but I would not recommend tapping Norway maples if you tap them. Now, New Jersey does not have a whole lot of sugar maple trees, at least in the southern part. If you look at this map, this is the map of 2011 maple syrup production, and it also kind of the brownish area, the dark brown area, is where all of the sugar maple trees kind of exist in the Northeast. And if you look closely at New Jersey, you can see that New Jersey is striped. The northern part has sugar maples, the southern part doesn't, which makes Stockton University, which exists in the southern part, such a great place to study it, because we are right on the border of quality maple tapping area, right? So we can do it, it's just not the most ideal. And exactly what the USDA wants, it wants to move maple tapping into niche markets. So let's get a close-up. Sorry for the blurry image, I just expanded this, but this is a close-up of New Jersey, and you can see northern New Jersey has tons of sugar maples, southern New Jersey doesn't. And if you're from southern New Jersey, you know the reason is because we have one of the largest national reserves. In fact, I think it's the largest national reserve in the US, one of the first national reserves too. If you ever get a chance to visit southern New Jersey, you should absolutely go for a hike in the Pinelands National Reserve. I will fully admit this, I'm not from New Jersey. I'm from Maryland and from Baltimore, and I had no idea that there was a southern part of New Jersey. I thought it was all just the suburb of New York City, and then I moved to New Jersey and I discovered the Pinelands. It is an amazing place to go. But as the name suggests, the Pinelands National Reserve, or also known as the Pine Barrens, is filled with pine trees. It's not known for being a rich sugar maple area. It has more than pine trees though. It's just called the Pine Barrens because pine trees are really common there, but there's a lot of other species. In particular, red maple is in the Pine Barrens. It's also pretty much everywhere. Red maple is one of the single most common, I think it may be like the first or second most common tree species in the United States, in the continental United States at least. It is everywhere. You definitely, if you're watching this and anywhere in this range, you definitely have a red maple tree within spitting distance. It is very common. All right. Now, the second problem that we're facing, in addition to not having sugar maple trees, the second problem that we're facing is that our climate isn't that great for optimal sap production. Here's the thing that you need to know if you're going to start tapping your trees. And it's also the thing to help you understand why good real maple syrup is so expensive. Because sap that we produce maple syrup from only flows during the short transition from winter to spring. And you heard me right, it only flows for about 3 to 4 weeks of the year. That's all the time that maple syrup producers have to collect the product that they need for their livelihood, which is why good maple syrup can be expensive. When cold night temperatures freeze the sap, and then warm daytime temperatures thaw the sap, that's what encourages sap to flow. It's what encourages sap to move up and down the tree. Now, I'm simplifying this a lot. I'm not a tree physiologist. We do have a forester on the grant who could explain it much better than I can, but that's not my training, and so I'm not going to fumble over my words. But you need cold nighttime temperatures and warm daytime temperatures. And that only occurs during that short transition from winter to spring. If you don't get these freeze-thaw periods, you're not going to produce natural sap flow. Now, there might be ways of producing unnatural sap flow, but we're not talking about that because that can damage the tree, all right? We need natural sap flow. Southern New Jersey experiences less severe and more prolonged winter to spring transitions. if you live in southern New Jersey, it almost feels like spring puts up this eternal battle to overcome winter. And winter doesn't usually put up that much of a fight. Southern New Jersey, it could go from winter to spring and back to winter and back to spring and back to winter and back to spring over the course of a couple months. It gets to be really variable. It's not like northern regions where there's clearly, you go from winter, you have a couple of weeks transition to spring. Southern New Jersey has this much more prolonged period, which can work to our advantage, but it can also be a disadvantage because it makes the tapping season less predictable, a little bit more difficult to draw sap from the tree. You might not get heavy output from the tree. So that's one of the things that we're trying to research on this grant is where we can optimally find red maple trees that will produce the most amount of sap. How are we doing on questions, Jess? Has anybody chimed in with anything?
I do not see any questions.
Guys, if you have anything to add, anything to say at all, please do just contribute. Like I said in the beginning, if you didn't hear me or if you weren't with us, we're just looking for advice, input. Give a shout out. Tell us where you're coming in from. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell me if you think I'm full of BS when I'm talking about, and I will welcome a conversation, guys. We are all scientists here on this grant, and we really want to have a conversation, not just with people in South Jersey, but with people from all over the world who have experience in tapping maple trees. This is really the USDA's goal, is to open this market up. So please do chime in with questions. All right. Now, in southern New Jersey, the point is the sap will flow from your red maple trees. It's going to flow. People do already tap maple trees in southern New Jersey. It's no surprise. People have been tapping red maple trees in southern New Jersey. It's just not common. The reason is because the sap flow isn't as predictable and it's just not as plentiful as in the northern regions. All right, so here's the time. If you want to start tapping your red maple trees, I'm going to tell you right now, go for it. If you have property or if you know of somebody with red maple trees, tap the red maple trees. If you have sugar maple trees, you should definitely find a way to tap them, but absolutely go for it. It's a really simple process and it's a lot of fun and you can produce a great product. Here's what you're going to do. You want to find trees that are at least 8 to 10 inches in what we call diameter at breast height, DBH for short. Now, this is a fancy term for just how wide is the tree trunk at your diameter level. Now, at a short person's diameter level, it might be different from a tall person's diameter level, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's just an average amount. So diameter at breast height. And the way that you could, you're looking for something that's ideally 12 inches, all right? You can, at least for red maple, I have heard people tapping down to 8-inch DBH trees. It's fine. You can tap 8-inch DBH trees. Ideally, you want 12 or more. The reason why you don't want to tap less than 8-inch DBH is because, remember, we're taking sap, which has nutrients and sugar. We're taking that from the tree. You don't want to take too much. The tree needs that. We're kind of intercepting it. Now, there's been research to show that you can take a little bit and the tree's going to be fine, but less than 8 inches, if you take that sap, the tree's not going to have anything left. So don't tap less than 8, unless you want to kill the tree. And now, I'm not promoting killing trees. However, there are some instances in which maybe you're trying to get rid of red maples in favor of things like Atlantic white cedar, and then, I don't know, it's better than killing the tree outright, and it's better than spraying pesticides on the tree to kill it. So use your own judgment, but don't be an eco-terrorist. If you want the tree to live, don't tap anything less than 8 inches. And the way that you can do it, you can buy a fancy diameter breast height ruler. This is not a normal ruler, as I always forget when I go to take out a ruler into the field and I accidentally take a DBH ruler. It doesn't measure in increments the same way. It's meant so that you can wrap it around the tree. You can also just take a normal ruler out to the field and measure the diameter of it. Just, look at it straight on and measure the diameter. It's fine. Another great way of doing it, average tree hugging size. All right, that's me. If you don't know, if you've never seen my picture before, that's me. I'm going bald on the top of my head, which is fantastic. If you could wrap your arms around the tree, just so, perfect tree size. Perfect tree size. If it's larger than that, go for it. If you have a double tree, one of those trees that kind of branch off like that, and both of them are like 10 inches, do both of them, okay? Less than 8 inches, try not to do it unless you're really dying to kill that tree, okay? Get yourself some taps. You can get a set of 20 stainless steel taps on Amazon for like 20 bucks. I'll talk about, for those of you that don't want to buy on Amazon, I'll talk about some local stores in just a second. If you're planning on tapping multiple times, multiple years, don't ever tap more than once per year, one tap per tree per year. Unless the tree is really large, and then you can do 2 or 3 taps. But usually just one tree, one tap per tree per year. Don't re-drill the taps. Get yourself some stainless steel taps. They can be sterilized year after year. They're really sturdy. You can buy them in 2 sizes, but the most common tap size is a 5/16 tap size. And the reason I say that is because the next thing that you got to get is a drill bit that's 5/16. Don't get one that's smaller. Don't get one that's larger. Get one that's exactly 5/16. Get a cordless power drill. You don't need a cordless power drill. You can use one of these things if you got one. I know I got one from my grandfather's house. It just takes a lot of motivation. And I got to tell you, when it's cold outside, I don't have that motivation. I'd rather just use some power, save yourself the time, go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you're going to go and get yourself a $30 cordless power drill. It'll save you a ton of time. All right. Then you want to get some 5/16 inch diameter food grade tubing. Again, you can get like a roll of 100 feet off online for really cheap. And that'll do you well for like, I don't know, years if you're only tapping a couple of trees. 5/16 inner diameter food grade tubing, just get a roll of it, make sure it's food grade. You don't want to get anything that has plastic that's going to leach chemicals into your sap. Get a food grade bucket with a lid. Make sure that you get a lid, and that'll be important in a second. Usually any bucket that's white is going to be food safe. If you're really dying to make sure that it's food safe, you gotta like maybe buy it from a brewing supplies store. Home Depot or Lowe's does sell it occasionally, but they might not always say that it's food safe. If it's white, it's usually food safe. And the reason is because it doesn't contain paint chemicals that leach off into the sap. Drill a hole in the lid for the tube to go into. All right, 5/16 hole. Drill it, put it in, or actually there's got to be a little bit larger than 5/16 at the inner diameter. Anyway, so drill a hole, put the tube into the hole. All right. You can buy all this stuff online if you want to. You can buy it from the big box stores if you want to. I got to tell you though, if you know of a maple supplies store, go there. They're going to be just as expensive or just as cheap. The prices are going to be the same. They want to give you advice. This is their job, and they want the same thing that our team wants, which is just to promote maple syrup production all throughout anywhere where it can be produced. All right. So this is my friend John up in Chester, New Jersey. He runs this place called the Maple Shop. All of our gear on this project, we're buying through him. We're trying to buy local. And we're getting better deals through him because we're able to buy local. He's a great guy. He's even come down to our university to help us and talk us through the entire process. He'll talk your head off over the phone. He's really nice, and he doesn't want to sell you anything if you don't want to buy it. He just wants you to be happy. And that's the way it is going to be for a lot of small stores, okay? When you get all your supplies and it's time to tap, and usually in southern New Jersey, you're going to want to tap sometime in like early December, maybe late December. The sap flow season is going to be January, February. You want to drill a hole into the tree, and we'll do a separate live stream on this when the time is right. You'll see us in the field do it so that you guys can get a step-by-step introduction here. You want to drill a hole in the tree at a slight upward angle. I would say less of an angle than what this picture is showing. Drill it about 2 inches deep. All right, not too far into the tree. And then if the end of the tap that you're going to use is solid, like the tap that I showed you, you definitely want some space between the end of the drill hole and the start of the tap. All right, grab a hammer, tap, tap, tap. It's called a tap for a reason, right? So you're gonna tap it in, and you're gonna just tap it in ever so gently. Don't damage the tree here any more than you already did by drilling the hole. And then connect it all up and collect the sap. You don't even need a bucket. You have a gallon container, sterilize it, collect the sap, okay? It's that simple, guys. If you only have a couple of trees, let's say you have 2 maple trees in your yard. Jess, I believe that you only had, what, 2 or 3?
I have 4.
You
Yeah.
have 4. And you produced enough to produce a couple, what is it, like 3 or 4 ounces of maple syrup?
We probably got, I would say maybe a quart.
You got a quart. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
if you only have a couple of trees in your yard, you can produce some maple syrup. Absolutely. You have 4 trees of decent size. Sorry, Jess, go ahead.
The Norways are actually pretty big sap producers, surprisingly.
Yeah, Norway maple is going to produce a lot of sap. And actually, most Norway maple trees are fairly large. And so you can actually tap a Norway maple tree in 2 spots, and you'll be safe without harming the tree. But again, Norway maple might produce some off flavors, and so you might not want to tap it. All right, connect it up, collect the sap. You're going to be done. You're going to collect that sap. And then the next step is, before I go on, this is not rocket science, guys. This is just really, you're just collecting the sap. The only thing you want to do, make sure you buy that bucket with a lid. If the bucket's not covered, you're going to get insects in the sap, right? Worse, you might get some like chipmunk that accidentally fell into it. You definitely don't want to come to a bucket with a chipmunk in it. All right, that's bad. So whatever you're going to use, just cover it. You don't have to use those taps. They're called spiles. You don't have to use those taps that we showed you. You can use whatever types of taps that you can find your hands on. Some of those taps come with little hooks on it so you can hang buckets. Whatever you want to use, totally cool. All right. Do consult, like email us if you have questions or concerns, absolutely, or talk to John at the Maple Shop, or talk to your local Maple Shop, maple syrup supplies supplier. You know, they'll recommend lots of stuff, okay? After that, after you collected the sap, then it's really just a waiting game. You have to boil off the water to concentrate all of the sugar. The sap that you collect is going to be anywhere from 1% to 4% sugar, and you have to get that up to 70% sugar. That means that you're going to be boiling off a whole bunch of water. Now, there's ways of increasing this process, and in a later live stream, we're going to talk to you about that, maybe using reverse osmosis to concentrate the sugar. And it's actually reverse osmosis because you're doing it the other way that it's supposed to be used for to concentrate the sugar. Or we'll talk about that at a later time. If you're just doing this in your backyard, you just have maybe like, I don't know, 10 gallons of sap that you want to boil, just do it over a fire. You can do it on a propane burner in your house or a gas burner in your house. It's not, they say that the wood gives it a little bit of a flavor. Also, you're going to wind up with a huge gas bill because it's going to take you a long time to burn off all of this stuff. So if you have an outdoor fire pit, just do it over the outdoor fire pit. There's going to be a lot of water. This is going to take you hours, guys. It's going to take you hours. You're probably going to want to boil, to make some coffee, to sit outside, to enjoy some company with some friends. You're going to want to sit tight, all right? If you really get invested in it, you want to buy a large flat pan evaporator, and this is what separates the home maple syrup producer from the large maple syrup producers. They invest in like these $10,000 pieces of equipment that have gigantic smokestacks, gigantic cast iron furnaces, and they have these large pans that will rapidly boil off all of this water. And we did buy that for our project. You don't have to, but if you want to, go for it. Point of all of this is you're not going to mess this up. If you want to do this, like, I'm not a motivational speaker here. I'm just a scientist who's trying to make a living during some very strange pandemic times and trying to get you guys excited about producing maple syrup, okay? You're not going to mess this up. The only possible way that you could the only possible way is if you overboil it, and then you're just going to have a really messy kitchen. You might have a little bit of blackened sugar that you could use. I would not. All right, so just don't overboil it. But that's really the only way that you could potentially conceivably mess it up, okay? Now, I'm almost at the end, guys. I just want to tell you why I'm talking to you about this, what business I have talking to you about this. I am a researcher at Stockton University. And Stockton University, last year in September, we received a USDA grant called an ACER Access Grant. The purpose of this grant is to promote and research maple tapping, all right? I'm not trying to make New Jersey the center of maple syrup production. I promise you, we're not going to compete with Canada. There's no way. We just want to get you tapping trees, and we want to figure out how we might be able to provide a good industry, like a small mom and pop, small like farmers market industry in southern New Jersey, a way to use land in a way that we haven't previously used it before. All right. Now, if you're not familiar with Stockton University, we are a fairly modern campus. We were built, I think it was in the 1960s, 1970s, late 1960s. Anyways, no, I think it was 1960. Anyway, we were built around then, and we keep on developing. We're doing great. We have a beautiful campus. Please check us out online. If you haven't heard of us, please take a visit if you want to. Especially right now, the campus is deserted because of the pandemic, and it's actually the best time to be there because you can go and there's nobody around. We are located right north of Atlantic City and right in the Pine Barrens. That's the cool thing. We are right in this area, which is not generally used for tapping. That's the reason why we got it, is so that we can bring tapping to a region that isn't normally tapped. Here's just an aerial view of our main campus. You can see at the core of it where you see Stockton University and the N-Wing student restaurant, et cetera, which is not actually that good of a restaurant. It's a good restaurant. Stockton University is situated right in the middle of 1,600 acres of Pine Barrens forest. And as I said, just because it's called Pine Barrens doesn't mean that it's only pine. We actually have a lot of red maple. And we're going to develop a good red maple tapping area called a sugar bush on our campus. So our first goal is to develop a working sugar bush on Stockton's campus that can be used not only for research and to produce syrup, of course, but also for workshops. If you are a high school teacher and you want to bring your student, or a middle school or an elementary school teacher, and you want to bring your students onto campus to show them this thing, we are more than happy to have you come to campus, and we will walk your class through our sugar bush. We want to bring people on our campus to see a modern operation and discuss how they can get their own operations up and running. Okay, and we're underway getting that. We just got a huge delivery of material. We're going to start tapping this fall and winter. We're going to hopefully come out with our first batch of good Stockton red maple syrup this spring. It's going to be great. Or it could be disastrous. I don't know, but it's going to be fun no matter what. All right, this is what a modern maple tapping area looks like. The blue tubes, instead of the bucket and tap thing, people get lazy, especially when they have hundreds of trees that they want to tap. So instead of running to each tree to collect a bucket of sap, we just string a bunch of plastic tubing all throughout the forest that runs the sap to a central bucket. And by a central bucket, I mean like 1,000-liter bucket. And that's what I mean, it's really the same exact process. You just kind of gradually take the bucket and walk backwards to your sugar shack where you're going to do everything. So it's the same thing. It's just a lot of tubing. All right. I don't know this guy. I don't know what he's doing. I just found this picture on Google Images. If you are this person, I'm sorry. You look angry. Anyways, the second goal of this grant is to research optimal types of land for tapping. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Favorito, who is a soil scientist at Stockton, to just talk about this part of the grant. Jessica, if you could just explain why we're going to these different sites and what kind of stuff we're looking for. Take it away, Jessica.
Sure thing. I don't know if anyone can see me or if I'm just kind of a disembodied voice at this point, but hi, I'm Jess Favorito. I am a soil scientist at Stockton. Yes, that is really what I do. I study dirt. But basically what we're doing is we're going to a number of different sites, owned like private sites for the most part, with maple stands on their property, and we are sampling soil, sampling tree litter, so the fallen tree litter, and collecting core samples of the soils as well to see. Mainly, we want to look at the science of tapping, the science of these maple trees. How sustainable is this process? It's kind of, in a way, maybe on a very small scale, kind of like disturbance, a type of ecosystem disturbance. So we're trying to see what the impacts are on soils, ecology, wildlife, and what their impacts are on maple trees and the tapping process. So for the soils, for the litter, we're going to be looking at nutrient content, macronutrients. So these are nutrients that plants need in high quantities, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, chemistry stuff, and micronutrients. So these are things that are needed in smaller quantities by vegetation. And we'll be looking at things like pH, okay? In all likelihood, the soils, particularly those closer to campus, are very acidic, which can impact nutrients and how likely trees are able to actually acquire those nutrients. Other things that we'll be looking at: soil texture, how moist the soils are, things that might impact nutrient retention to the tree, density, which could be impacted by not only just the tapping process. So density basically tells us how compact or not compact a soil is. So when people are walking through the ground to access the trees, even wildlife, that can impact how densely packed soils are. Litter, there might be an impact from tapping on litter quantity and quality, which can inherently impact how dense a soil is. And tapping itself, right? So in that sap, we have carbohydrates, okay? And there might be an impact on the amount of litter because you need carbohydrates in order to produce the tree foliage as well. So those are just a number of different things that we're going to look at to see, are those impacted by tapping? Does tapping have an impact? And our forester, Matt Olson, is going to be doing more so the work that's related to examining the impacts on trees and which trees are most ample for sap production. That's all that I got.
Thanks, Jess. So yeah, we're going to be looking at a lot of stuff, and I do see that there's some questions on Facebook that I missed. I'm going to answer them in a second. Before I answer them, just to add to what Jess is saying, if you would like to participate in this grant, we have good news, all right? If you live in southern New Jersey, all right, and if you have a few acres of forest and you think you have red maple trees or sugar maple trees on them, all right, and if you want free tapping equipment, all right, and I do mean free, we will give you free tapping equipment. Leave a comment or just email us at maplegrant@stockton.edu. We're interested in talking with you, all right? The USDA has given us money to give you the equipment to help you tap trees, and we want to give it out to you. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this seminar right now, is to make you aware. We don't know otherwise than other than knocking on people's door to door of reaching out to you. We want to hear from you, and we want to start tapping trees, to help you start tapping trees. All we ask is, if we give you the equipment, what we want, oh, and here, seriously, it's free. If you live in any of these counties in southern New Jersey, any of these counties, we would love to hear from you, all right? Even if you only have a couple of acres, maybe if you only have like 10 or 15 trees and you only have like 1 acre of property, we're still interested in talking with you. We might not use your land for the research purposes that I'm going to talk about in a second. We're still interested in working with you and potentially giving you some equipment, okay? All we want in exchange for giving you the equipment is to take some soil samples. That's what Jessica was talking about. We want to record the types of trees on your property. We're going to have you record the amount of sap and syrup you produce. We're going to have you hold some samples of that sap for us so that we can measure how much sugar is in that sap. You keep everything else. You keep the equipment at the end. You keep the sap. You keep all the syrup that you produce. We want to know whether you enjoyed it on pancakes or not. And if you would like to invite us to your pancake brunch, we will more than likely invade, because we do like pancakes. Well, Jessica, it turns out, does not like pancakes.
Oh,
I'm
God,
very confused by that.
to remember.
What?
Of all the things to remember.
Right. For some reason, she doesn't like pancakes, which you don't understand because it's a cake. What?
French toast.
Okay, well, French toast. Okay, so French toast. If you invite us to a French toast brunch, by all means. But no, you keep everything if you want to. It's totally cool. You keep it. All we want to know is how much you're producing, and we want to take some soil samples. Really non-invasive stuff. We're not going to require too much time on the property. And of course, during these pandemic times, we will be wearing masks. We ask that you wear a mask too, just to keep us safe and keep liability down. I know people's opinions differ on that. It's just to keep liability down, to make sure that everyone's staying safe. And we will, we'll just come out to your property. We'll show you what we're doing. Everything is transparent. In fact, what we were going to do today, we didn't because of its rain. We were going to show you what we've been doing on property so that you know what to expect if you are having us out. All right. Before I jump to my next slide, I do want to address just some questions that people were asking in case anybody has to leave. So I'll just go in order. Diana Seeger, it's a very creative way of spelling Diana, if it is. Wonderful name. Sorry, I was a bit late. Is the red maple the tree seen near swampy areas with bright foliage in the fall? Yes. Sugar maple can also be seen in those areas, but red maple is notorious for being in swampy areas, especially in southern New Jersey. Red maple is well known for being in swampy areas. There is such a thing as swamp maple too, but it's not nearly as prevalent, and it's usually pretty easily distinguishable. You can look it up. I'm not going to go into it now. You also ask, are we allowed to tap trees on state land? That is a great question. I think that the answer is no. However, I will look into it and I'll post a response to that later on. Jess and Judy, do you guys know?
No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, I'll look it up and
see.
see.
The properties that we have are state.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think that the answer is yes, because you need permission to go onto that, but you're also allowed to hunt on state land, and so you might be able to, except you need a permit to hunt. I don't know if you would need a permit to tap maple trees. I would be more worried about people destroying your property if you do put something else out, like, you know, how you lock a tree stand. I don't know. I'll find out for you and let you know. Maria asks, can you keep the water or a bit of it to lessen the sugar content? You don't have to make syrup at all. People drink the sap water just out of the, I mean, there's stories of people that drink the sap just for breakfast. Some of the best sap producers don't make syrup from it. They just store it in their fridge and drink it like tea. Totally, you can keep that sap. You can dilute the syrup if you want dilute syrup, by all means.
I can answer that actually, Aaron.
Say what, Judy?
I can answer that because
Go ahead.
my family actually enjoys it to be a little bit more watery. So we do tap our maples. And all of us like the syrup to be a little bit more watery. We don't boil it all the way down. But what we do then is that we either store it in the fridge or we can it. So when in order for it to be stable, like shelf stable, I think you need that higher concentration of sugar. So we will either can it to keep it for long periods, or we store it in the fridge.
Yeah. And it's really good. I've also, I'm personally excited because I'm a home brewer myself. And this is another potential market for it. If you brew your own beer or even your own wine, you can actually use that as your base for brewing. And we are talking with a couple brewers around New Jersey who are interested in using sap water as a base for their beer. So I hope that answers your question. I don't see any others. And now that you heard from Judy, I'm going to move it on to our third goal, which is really to educate and engage, exactly what we're doing here. And I'm going to let Judy talk a little bit about her efforts on this. So Judy, take it away.
Hi guys, I'm Judy Vogel. I'm actually a mathematician at Stockton, and I'm involved in this project because my family has been harvesting maple sugar for probably about 5-6 years now. So we live on a little hobby farm in the middle of the Pine Barrens, and we're raising 3 little girls. And basically, we're trying to live a life in which we have them be as curious as they can be. And that has translated into sort of a hobby, self-sustainable family lifestyle, which basically means we do lots of activities related to homesteading, but they cost a lot more than actually just going and buying it in a store. And anyway, one of the activities that we've been doing for a very long time now is producing maple sugar, or tapping our maple trees and producing maple syrup from them. So all of this kind of came together to work with some of these other wonderful scientists on this grant because of the experience that my family had. So my role in the grant is really very closely tied to what my goal has always been as a mother with this activity, which is just to promote the curiosity of this idea of a sustainable forest resource. So we look at how we have some of these dense forests that are in the Pine Barrens and this sort of prolific red maple. And what better way than to value this product than to find something that is sustainable, that we can harvest from these trees. And so that's really my goal. My goal is to get people really interested in this. So there's a lot of stuff we know already. We know that you can tap in New Jersey, right? We know this. I've been doing it for years, and we've had a lot of feedback from people. We also know that we're, as Aaron was saying, we're not going to be overtaking the Vermonts of this industry, right? We know that as well. But what we don't know is what is that in between part, right? What does it mean to produce maple syrup at a level that could be sort of a hobby, or at a cottage industry level, right? Or the farmer who has land and part of its forest. And this is really an off season for our forests. And so we have participants who are campgrounds. We've gotten interest from golf clubs, actually, right? Where there's trees that can be tapped. And of course, homeowners as well. So my approach is really sort of threefold. I'm looking at, first of all, encouraging people who have larger tracts of land, where we can actually come conduct some, as Aaron was saying and Jessica was saying, some sort of low invasive research on the soil. I'm also really interested in encouraging the family who has 2 or 3 or 4 maples in their backyard, and really wants to learn how to do this as an activity. And again, it teaches your kids curiosity, and it teaches them, to me, the most important lesson is patience. It's really amazing to eat a product that you've worked basically all year for, right? That you've sort of nurtured these trees, and you've waited for this one moment in the season in which you can actually tap, and then you work together as a family to turn that sap, which just tastes like water when it comes out of the tree. Although every kid I've met has said it tastes sweet. They can taste the sugar in the sap. I think we lose that when we become adults. But as a family, you then work to boil it down into syrup. So that's the second. So one is the sort of the large landowner or larger landowner for research, the backyard enthusiast. And then sort of the third prong of what I'm hoping to do is to really start an education-based program in which we reach out to schools and other community sites and develop a curriculum. Because the wonderful thing about tapping maple trees is that it covers a multitude of disciplines. You can look at it from a very scientific perspective, a chemistry perspective. You can look at it in terms of environmental sciences and sustainability. You can look at it from an economic standpoint and as a business model. As a mathematician, I'm going to be working with our economists to look at it as building mathematical models and teaching our students about modeling. And so with all, if you can look at it from a historical perspective as well and the history of it. So all of these sort of multifaceted ways of approaching this one topic make it ideal for a curriculum in schools and other community sites. And so those are basically the three ways that I'm approaching this from a more, an outreach perspective. But in the end, I really am here to encourage the community as a whole to see the value of trying something new and viewing the world with curiosity.
Thanks, Judy. That was a great summary of our efforts, and we're really kind of developing new ways of doing this. And again, if anybody has any suggestions of ways that we could reach out to people, to youth, would be great. I know that we have. I was just looking at somebody who was watching our videos. I think we have a librarian on here. We might be able to even walk into some libraries and do some workshops at a community library. Any suggestions that you have to really reach out? Remember, we're going to listen to them. All right. That's the goal of this grant. We really want new and novel ways of reaching out. So I just was looking while Judy was talking, not that I wasn't interested in what she was saying, but I was looking at rules and regulations for tapping on state land. And it looks like, at least in Pennsylvania, you do need a permit to tap on state land. I don't know if that's the case in New Jersey. I have a feeling that if you ask a New Jersey state forester whether you can tap on their land, they're going to look at you like, I didn't even know that you could tap trees in New Jersey, because a lot of them don't know that this is a viable commodity either. So I think that you are going to need to get a permit to do it, and you're definitely going to need to take down all of your equipment each year. But I'm not going to be, I can look into it a little bit further. That was just what I saw initially.
My guess would be that, like you were saying, Aaron, that there may not be legislation on it. And maybe that's another thing that our grant can start exploring.
Yeah, that would be great. So Maria and Lorianne both suggest urban farming programs in Camden. That would be great, Maria. If you know of urban farming programs that we can reach out to, we don't know of them. So please drop us a message and tell us which ones you think would be worth reaching out to. We will. And Lorianne says, would you like to speak to a pack of Cub Scouts? Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We will go to them. They can come to us. Perfect.
Or we can do remote during this time as well.
We can also do remote. We are more than happy to jump on Zoom. Of course, we have corporate Zoom accounts, so we can do all kinds of things that maybe you at the home can't do. So yes, absolutely. So yeah, keep the suggestions coming. And I just want to end off this information seminar because we don't have 3 of the 6 main principal investigators on this grant. This is a large team, and this is one of the great things about working at a university where we can, especially one like Stockton, where we're so interdisciplinary. I myself, I'm an aquatic ecologist and a forest ecologist. Judy is a mathematician and a backyard home syrup producer. And Jessica is a soil scientist. We also have Maria Maj, who is exploring the economics of maple syrup tapping, hopefully building some business models, looking at some of the economics behind tapping red maples in a very new niche market. Matt Olson, who is relatively new to Stockton, he is our forester on the project. He knows a lot more about tree physiology, about community ecology and forests than I do. He's a silviculturist, and so he tries to find ways of promoting unique forest growth to conserve forests. And we also have Kat Clark, or Caitlin Clark, we always call her Kat. She is, as she told me to call her yesterday, our horticultural specialist. She was really essential in getting the organic farm up and running at Stockton. She was one of the visionaries behind this grant at Stockton. She is she's really, really knowledgeable. She's actually currently a doctoral student down at the University of Florida, but she is still very active in the program. And she is definitely going to be helping us with all sorts of things, and she's constantly giving advice. So with all of that, is there anything else that either Judy or Jessica, you guys would like to say?
No, good.
All right, well, let me just check to see if there's any other comments.
I don't think so.
Here too, but not farming centered. Okay, well, great, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and have a great one, okay?
Bye.